In the modeling world, you either rise quickly or fade into obscurity. I was still new, struggling to find my place, when Josephine invited me on a road trip. Josephine was everything I wasn't: gorgeous, popular, and fearless. When she suggested a weekend getaway to Joshua Tree with a couple of other models, Melanie and Claire, I jumped at the chance to finally feel like I belonged. We packed our bags and hit the road, the excitement palpable as we left the city behind. Josephine drove, her laughter infectious as we sang along to the radio, the wind whipping through our hair. The plan was simple: spend a few days in the desert, take some stunning photos, and escape the pressures of the industry. But Josephine had another idea. She brought along a stash of magic mushrooms, promising us a spiritual journey. By the time we reached the secluded Airbnb nestled among the rugged Joshua trees, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the landscape. We unpacked and settled in, the isolation of the desert both exhilarating and unnerving. As night fell, Josephine handed out the mushrooms, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. At first, the trip was fun, a burst of colors and patterns that seemed to dance in the air. We laughed at nothing, our bodies light as feathers, floating through the night. But soon, the effects intensified, and the world around us began to warp in disturbing ways. Josephine's face shifted, her features stretching and contorting into something inhuman. Her eyes glowed a sinister red, and her voice became a low, guttural growl. She looked at me, her expression one of malevolent delight, and I realized with a jolt of fear that she wasn't entirely herself anymore. The desert around us, once beautiful, now felt alien and threatening. The shadows seemed to move on their own, creeping closer with each passing second. The stars overhead twisted into strange constellations, their light cold and unfeeling. It was as if the entire world had turned against us. As the hallucinations grew stronger, so did our paranoia. We were starving, but when we went to the kitchen, we found that all the snacks we'd packed were gone. The only thing left was a single can of Pringles in the car. Josephine's mood darkened, and she glared at us accusingly. "You were in charge of the snacks," she hissed at Melanie, her voice dripping with venom. Melanie backed away, her eyes wide with fear, but Josephine wasn't done. Her anger flared, and she lunged at me, grabbing the can of Pringles and bashing it against my head. I stumbled backward, dazed and confused, as Josephine continued to attack, her hands clawing at my face. The world around me twisted and spun, her face morphing into the grinning Pringles mascot, a grotesque caricature that laughed as she tore into me. Melanie and Claire screamed, trying to pull her off, but Josephine's strength was terrifying. She fought them off, her eyes wild with fury, until finally, they managed to drag her away. I collapsed on the ground, my head throbbing, blood trickling down my face. We retreated to the car, locking ourselves inside as Josephine raged outside, pounding on the windows and screaming incoherently. The desert around us was dark and silent, the stars cold and distant. We were trapped in a nightmare, and there was no escape. As we sat there, trembling and scared, I noticed something under a blanket in the back seat, the bag of snacks we had been searching for. It had been there all along, hidden in plain sight. But now it felt like a cruel joke, a reminder of how quickly things had spiraled out of control. Josephine eventually calmed down, the effects of the mushrooms wearing off. She collapsed against the side of the car, exhausted and spent. We drove back to the city in silence, the weight of what had happened hanging over us like a dark cloud. When we finally reached home, we went our separate ways, too shaken to speak. I avoided Josephine after that, unable to look her in the eye without remembering the terror of that night. The modeling world felt even more alien and isolating than before, and I knew I would never be the same. The scars from that night were more than just physical, they were a constant reminder of how easily reality could slip away, leaving only fear and madness in its wake.